Richard, welcome to Tortoise. Thank you so much for joining us. You've just released your latest work, the Unfinished Harauld Hughes, which is here.
Yep.
For those of you who haven't read it, it's an extraordinary
I presume
book.
everyone.
Can you give an overview of what the Unfinished Harauld Hughes is?
Well, the book is about a playwright who essentially has faded from the public consciousness and died about 20 years ago. And he was in the royal court post-war angry playwright tradition, and he turned his attention to writing screenplays. He sort of left the theatrical milieu and went into sort of exploitation work, and everyone was very disappointed. He kind of rationalized it, and then he stopped writing in about 1976. So he was working on a film called O Bedlam, A State of the Nation Address, and it sort of fell apart because he ate the script in an argument with the director Leslie Francis, he came to prominence directing the film which was awarded the most innovatively punctuated film at the Berlinale in 1970. So there's the biography of Harauld Hughes, and the idea is that I find a copy of his Two-Hander trilogy, one of his early plays, collections, and I'm struck by the resemblance of his dust jacket photo to me, and I decide that I'm going to follow him and follow his path and try and find out why he stopped writing, and end up making a documentary called The Unfinished Harauld Hughes. So that's that one. And then which one's...
We have the whole collection.
Yes, and then this one is all of his plays. And this one is all the first three films, the Models trilogy, the Swinging Models, The Model and the Rocker, and The Especially Wayward Girl. And then this is the later four films, The Deadly Gust, The Glowing Wrong, the Awful One from Space, and The Terrible Witch. And that also contains his poems and prose works as well, the plays.
And Harauld Hughes doesn't exist?
No, he doesn't exist.
It's an extraordinary bit of work. You wrote these books before you wrote the Unfinished Harauld Hughes.
Yes. So I wrote what Harauld wrote in chronological order.
Yes.
Because otherwise that book would make no sense.
Quite.
Yeah. So I needed to know what he'd written to write about what he'd written.
One of the plays, he wrote his first play, Platform, in 1960, but it was his fourth play, Roost, written unusually before his third play, Roast.
Yes.
So he's written his fourth play before his...
Yes, he wrote his fourth play as a fourth play before he'd written his third play. Because some plays are fourth plays.
And you don't need me to tell you.
Yes. In fact, I always found it quite funny. Eric Romer did the brilliant series of morals and proverbs, and he specifically did write them out of order. There was one that was going to be the fourth, and one was going to be the third. And My Night with Maud happened after The Collectioners, which he wrote as the one to come after My Night with Maud. But it's very important to him that this comes after that one.
Indeed. Yeah. So who is Harauld, and what's he famous for? Your creation of a world is extraordinary. You can tell me what Harauld was doing in, say, for example, the year 1960, 1943.
He was writing Platform, yeah. That was his first play, Platform, about it's about a disgruntled rocker and a sort of a bourgeois housewife who meet on a platform, and he torments her intellectually and breaks her down. So that's Platform. That's the play that brought him to prominence.
Yeah, and then following Platform in the year...
Table.
Yeah.
1960.
Yeah.
After that's Table, 1961, and then Roast and Roost, the two together. And then by that stage, the Harauld Hughes half-hour television program had been commissioned.
Yeah.
So that came in 1965, and then that included Prompt and Flight, which were written especially for the Harauld Hughes half hour, and then Shunt, which had been staged outside originally, in a park with no audience. And that ended the series. And then his last play was Dependence.
Okay, next.
Yeah.
In right at the beginning of the Unfinished Harauld Hughes,
Yeah.
the character Lady Virginia Lovelock,
Yes, his
says-
second wife.
his second wife,
Yeah.
says, "We are all in some ways characters of our own creation. It's hardly surprising that our lives are replete with both invention and omission. Harold insisted we be truthful."
Yes.
How much of that have you taken into your work here?
Well, I do agree that it's impossible to be entire. Well, I have a certain issue with the idea of authenticity, because I think authenticity often just means unvarnished or sometimes boring. That somehow you can strip back to some kind of essential essence, which I don't think there necessarily is. It's like the thing of saying form and content. I think form is content.
Okay,
Yep.
right. But this is work of fiction based on real world, with real life observations. There's some extraordinary observations in here.
Okay.
Let's
I mean, in a way, I sort of feel all fiction
it's
has...
based in real.
Well,
life.
yeah, to an extent or not. I don't know... I've never worried about it that much. You know, reading a book, I've never gone, I don't think this happened. It's fine.
Yeah. There's one observation that, let's begin with one, which many people in this room will resonate with them, on Elephant and Castle. Mm-hmm. In the book, Harold, in Unfinished Harauld Hughes, says, of Elephant and Castle, regardless of subsequent redevelopments, Elephant and Castle still consists primarily of a highly hostile, non-intuitive roundabout.
Yes, I actually say that. Harold doesn't say
Sorry,
that.
yes, yeah.
But Harold did grow up near the Elephant and Castle on Brook Drive, on the same street that Come on Eileen was filmed by. Yes, exactly. And the shop's no longer there.
Well, of course it's not,
Which
because
is
it's still. They've done something to it.
Yeah, but up until very recently it was preserved. I can't believe there weren't protesters just outraged that they, you know.
Because you must go around that bit quite often.
Yeah.
Living in South London yourself.
I passed it today.
And it's still.
It's a very
hostile.
It's a hostile roundabout. I remember when you went underneath into that maze of tunnels where it's just like, who do you want to be assaulted by? And it's just like some subterranean dealer's choice every time you went through it. So it's slightly better that now, but it's still like there's no sense to the cycle lanes. It's just like, try.
Well, you go.
You have to
from
cross.
the south, you go round to the left. And then you
Kind
go
of.
round to the.
You kind of go around to the left, but you can also go around to the right, and then you cross another cycle lane and they're always going through like.
The green lights for the buses go that, and then the.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even live in South London, but I agree with you entirely.
Yeah.
Let's
There's
go
only
back to
so
this.
right you can be against a bus. My feeling is questions of right and wrong really don't matter.
That is truth.
Yeah.
There is truth, and there is.
I yield. Yeah.
But you are making entire worlds through these books, more than just a few characters, and how they interact with each other. I think there was one moment particularly where later on in the book you introduce a character called Miloš Merek, mm-hmm. and the way that you introduce Miloš into the book is you say that he exists, but then the thing that's written about Miloš is actually an article written in a newspaper
by a director.
About Miloš. And it just occurred to me that we're in the inception levels of kind of world building. Do you, from a practical sense, have anything up on your wall saying this character is here and exists in this realm?
Well, you sort of have notebooks and things like that, and I'd have names, but when you meet anyone, they do another thing. And, I think everyone has these sort of different aspects to them. And so really, it's just a sort of world where, because people are in this world are writers or directors or actors, they've done other things. And so those things that they do become part of the story. And so it feels quite fun. It doesn't feel like, I'd find it very difficult to do some incredibly complex time dimension portal things. But anyone here is holding huge amounts of strange, tentacular information about. I can name 10 Brad Pitt films. Why? I don't know. And I don't know Brad Pitt, but I know a lot about him, just as some person you pull out of the air. And then I know the other people who are in that film and what they did, and everyone's got this kind of strange web of knowledge. Pop culture knowledge is quite complex in a weird way.
And how long did this kind of take you to formulate, in terms of not just the world and the writing of it, but in terms of, okay, this person exists here, and this person exists here? Was it a chronological process? So did you start from 1934 when Harauld is born? Sorry if I've got the wrong year.
Okay, sure. No, it's fine.
Was it right?
1931. But it's fine. But I did start with writing his first play. So the introduction in terms of the writing was through what he wrote. For whatever reason, that seemed to make sense to me. And from actually starting writing that to now is maybe 4 years. But it had been circling around for at least 10 years.
And COVID gave you a good
I'm out the other side of that now. But not really, because like many people, homeschooling, there was less time in COVID in a certain way. Just got tinnitus as a side effect.
No, I also got that.
That's
too.
good.
Yeah. And apologies for 1931, because
No.
it was 1932 that he was sent to London by his mother to fend for himself.
Yes, he was. Yes. Yes. Well, the thing is, his mother was a nun, an oft-lapsed nun called Ophelia Hughes, and his father was called Clifton Monkey Perch, and well, that was his stepfather. His real father wasn't unknown, but has lived within the Ibadan region of Nigeria.
An oft-lapsed nun that you talk about his mother, because there's one of many incredible lines in here, which is Hughes in a newspaper article about his mother, where he says that she was maligned as a strumpet, but I know for a fact that my father can be narrowed down to a group of no more than 20 men. Yes,
yes, that is true.
In terms of the where you've got to, not just in writing this book, but your career overall. So you've written plenty of books, directed films, done music videos, panel shows, other comedy bits and pieces. Where do you feel at home most creatively?
I like writing, partially because it places few demands on others, and so the sense of wasting the time of others is reduced. But I do like directing, where you are very often wasting the time of others. So that I really like. So probably in the writing, the making of things. And in terms of being in things, I've tended only really to be in things of people I know in some way. So very much on an amateur footing, as a, like a cricket team where someone can't show up that day.
A ringer?
Yeah, a ringer. But not good. A ringer, I feel, is someone who comes in is really good at pool. I mean, like, there's no one else. That's what I mean. Yeah.
That's about your own talents, or?
I don't think about whatever they are, insofar as whatever they are, but I think it has always been on the basis of a personal connection. It hasn't been sort of professional ever.
That's really.
I had one audition for I think it may well have been. No, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. It was not good, but and it was so. It was so clear. I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. I had no preparation. That I have never really gone to them again because I just go. I can't do it.
And so, do people just ask you, say, Richard, I want you?
No, they don't ask. No.
You just turn up, or
oh, you mean when I am in?
When you are in things.
Oh, sorry, it's so infrequent. I didn't even allow it as a possibility. Yeah, that is what. Yeah, they would just phone or these days text and say, "There's this thing," and now if it doesn't take too long, I will consider it.
That's something I like about your work in the round is it feels like there's a gang, obviously a loose gang, but
right.
you watch your work, and Paddy Considine appears in both the Double and Submarine.
Mm-hmm.
Chris O'Dowd, who obviously you were in the IT Crowd with, appears in the Double. Yasmin Page is in both. Then you go back to your work with people like Matt Berry, and it's so thrilling to see, obviously the IT Crowd, but then he's in the Super Furry Animals video that you do as well.
Yeah, sure.
Does that relationship work with those guys as well? Do you kind of call them up and go, can you be a ringer for me?
Well, I would. Partially, I also think in auditions, when I've done them as a director, I really feel for people coming in because it's a very awkward situation. It's very short, and there's a tension. There's a sense of judgment that's totally inimical to being relaxed or finding out whether they can do something. So as long as someone isn't like frightened of being filmed, and you think they will be suited, that's good enough. That's a really like a good level, rather than just saying who comes in with a precise inflection I imagined 1 year ago through chance. That seems a sort of horrible, kind of ordeal to put someone through.
That's
so I do prefer to offer a job to someone. Rather than
the going back to the writing and on this book as well, there feels like moments, and of course this is written as the narrator, but on Harauld Hughes. But are there moments in there where you've put what you think into the mouths of other characters? Because specifically on writing, for example, a character says in the book, I'm more of a writer. Television helps afford me the time to write. Mm-hmm. Would that be you?
Well, I think when you're writing, or when I'm writing, I don't know what happens when you write. When I write, I'm trying not to make them sound like me in a way, but sometimes I will agree with the character. So that's, I think, when we were writing a show called Garth Marenghi, one of the things we found funny was, say, James Herbert sometimes, although he definitely wasn't the worst offender, let's say certain horror writers, if they were describing something like a giant rat attack, would in the middle just say, and also as well as, being assaulted by these rats, one of the worst things is the parking in Peterborough. And you go, this does not connect to the plot. And so whenever that comes in and you go, oh, okay. But within this book, to be clear, I'm in this book. So if I'm in it, then there will be certain things that are like me. But it's not me. It's a sort of version of me. It's a fake me. But I'm a fake me, so it's fine.
On that, there's a couple of... I hope I don't butcher your work, or it feels like you feel like I am, in terms of that exact thing that you just mentioned in this kind of moments where it's just completely incongruous to the rest of the plot. A couple of moments in here where I think you've probably used that as a device where, for example, it seems that no one is in the Midlands. It seems that no one in the Midlands is there voluntarily.
That's not something I think.
She sounds Portuguese, or maybe she's Spanish and drunk.
Now, I had noticed that when Adam Buxton does an impression of being Portuguese, he just sounds drunk.
Okay.
I had noticed that.
I've never heard him do one.
He sounds drunk.
Yeah.
He sounds a bit like Björk.
Okay. Famous Icelandic.
Yeah.
Yeah. You describe someone, Mickey Perch, as metabolically incapable of fidelity. That's a lovely name.
But that is true of that character.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he claims about himself, because he's just an awful person.
Yeah. He does come across as awful.
Yes, yes. He's a sort of kind of a denizen of old Soho.
Yeah. And one of my particular favourites, the words are jagged and paper-stained, as if Edgar Allan Poe had written an IOU from an abattoir.
Okay, yeah. Who says that? Now, I can't remember who says that. I think, yeah. I don't know who said that one.
I should have written it down. That's on me.
No, it's fine.
It was... it's the narrator.
Oh, it's me. Good. Yeah.
You've just arrived back to the Novotel Hotel.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, I think I'd say that.
There's another line that I wanted to ask you about, which, again, on that loose theme of what is you, what are you putting in the mouths of others, that actually struck me really, because it kind of speaks to wanting to make work that lasts and longevity of it, which is that someone says that film is a particular medium. On the one hand, it is an art form, and on the other, it is a confection to be consumed, a creation of no greater solemnity or substance than a meringue, and one that must be sold quickly before it collapses to make way for the next batch. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a fantastic paragraph, by the way.
Okay. Well, that's Lady Virginia Lovelock. Yeah. She says
who's an incredibly verbose and woman.
Well, she's a sort of literary figure, and she's Harold Hughes's final widow, and so she writes. Yes, so she has that kind of a florid manner, but yes, there is something, especially that generation didn't take films that seriously. I think they were surprised by what we've come to take for granted, that there will be a permanent archive of these films, that they will be on home formats, or, then I don't think people seeing films in the 40s thought, oh, well, obviously we'll watch this again in 20 years. It was just like a constantly moving river.
And now this is obviously different.
Yeah, it's different. And there's something, if you go to the BFI, there can be something hermetic about the preservation of it all.
I rewatched Submarine recently, and in preparation for this, and I realised I have it on DVD.
Okay.
And I put it in my DVD player, my PlayStation actually.
Okay.
Don't know who has a DVD player anymore, but I thought, I'm not having this. It's in standard definition. There's no way. So I ended up renting it.
Okay.
To watch it in HD.
And how was the transfer?
It was great. There was an element of, I felt like my eyes have become clear in the last 15 years.
Okay.
I've watched it in a different, funny enough, I watched it in a different lens. Obviously, 14 years on, because I've got older. And so
that happens.
It's been known to happen.
Okay, yes. So it worked in HD.
It does. There wasn't a question there. It was a small... It was just making the point of wanting to make work that lasts. Is that something that you kind of consider as a given now?
Oh, no. I mean, I don't... Orson Welles had a very good phrase, which was, he said, posterity is vulgar. And so there's something good about that from, the person who made a film about posterity and who's... but who knows, these may last less long than the pyramids. We don't know yet. Maybe not. But maybe these will outlast them. But
there are only 750 copies.
There are only 750
We're actually
copies.
We're privileged actually to be in the room with them.
Yes.
I think this is. I mean, just in case people don't know, this is full of actual words.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. But it's the highest praise you can have for an author. make a note of that for the count. Contains actual words. Yes.
Yeah, this is number 238.
Yes.
And these are all been... Yeah.
Yes, yeah, they're hand numbered and signed also by hand. But
do you hope that there are going to be more printed of them?
There will be, yes.
Okay.
I think because they did sell out because it was a small I think no one thought this was a good idea in a certain way. So it was going to be a limited edition, but which often with things I do happens naturally. They're all limited editions by public interest. And so, but it seemed, again, this was the kind of thing that this kind of writer would do. That he would have a kind of small imprint of, there are only 30 of these. And I like that kind of literary publishing.
So with the additional run, that means that they might last longer than the pyramids. But we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. But in terms of wanting to make work that lasts, I think there's a nice element of your work which is such a diverse mix. And Submarine, The Double, but then actually your music videos. And it occurred to me thinking about your body of work and in terms of you made some of the most kind of the biggest music videos in indie rock. Would it be fair to say?
I genuinely don't know.
I think people will still be listening to Fluorescent Adolescent by Arctic Monkeys.
I think that has something to do with them.
But in terms of the way that people consume it,
yeah.
Do you know how many hits it's had?
I don't.
Do you want to know?
No. Okay.
179 million views.
Again, I think that is something to do with them. So, that's... I think if you took the music off it, the hit count would diminish.
I think people, for example, the Cornerstone video.
Right, yes.
I think people would like to look at Alex Turner for that length of time.
Yeah.
Especially in that iteration.
Okay. Well,
41 million views, by the way, that one. That's not bad.
Well, again, I feel it's just nothing to do with me.
Firstly, what's that relationship like with Alex? Is it I'm reticent to use the word bromance, or is it just purely a working collaboration?
I'm not sure when the word bromance came in, but it's hard to know what it added. So I would resist the term. On a personal level, I just really, he's self-evidently a genius and incredible musically. So it's just, I keep pushing my luck with asking him to do things. And in between projects, he's very graciously done them. So he did the music for, there's an audio book before for a children's book called The Book That No One Wanted to Read. He did the music for that. There was the title. It's also a prophecy, but also the title. And I think musicians that I know really tend to like films, and they sort of are interested in them and interested in soundtracks, and maybe particularly that generation where soundtracks became really important again, maybe through Tarantino and Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola and that generation. And
do you, in terms of the audiobook itself, do you direct his music? How does that work?
He just does it. I mean, I'll give some reference ideas of things, but he's doing the music. That's like...
It's what he's best known for.
Yeah, I think if you get Daniel Day-Lewis, he's doing the acting. Daniel, bring it down a bit.
We'll come to some questions from the floor momentarily. There's a couple of things that I wanted to ask about, specifically the book. Badminton comes up. I stopped counting.
Okay, Harauld Hughes was a prominent badminton ambassador.
Yeah.
So he was, for many years, one of the more prominent public-facing figures
Indeed,
he played badminton.
He did so much to restore the game to social prominence.
Yes, he did.
What happened to badminton in those?
What happened in those? Well, he competed,
Yeah.
and he actually met Lady Virginia Lovelock at a badminton tournament, where he asked her to play in the mixed doubles. She was still married to Langley Lovelock. And so it was just a sort of a social fixture for him, and a way to meet other writers and big minds and thrash it out.
A particular character was into theatre, badminton, Yeats, and the exhausting logistics of marital betrayal.
Yes, that was a time.
That was...
Different times.
It was. Is there something inherently funny about badminton, or was it just...
Well, from the sound of this, no. But I do like the idea of creating a tiny parachute on each ball. Somebody's going, these balls are going far too fast. There's some kind of drag here.
Quite comical about the amount of effort you have to put in to send something such a short distance.
I find it's low energy, violent. Just all the things are slicing. It seems like there's a large element. When I was young, when people were playing badminton, it seemed to be the thing that you did if you didn't want to move in games. That's what you did badminton for. So I just like it. I also like the sound of badminton.
There is a particularly satisfying
it's a pleasant sound. Squeak, puck, squeak, puck. Yeah.
The little
yes,
thing that
yes.
the shuttlecock makes in the air.
Very good.
I'm glad that we cleared that up.
Okay.
And then
Do I have the job?
And then, funnily enough, on the job.
Okay.
There's a couple of mentions of journalists, which
okay.
There's a couple of journalists in the room, I'm sure this evening. But you say that Harauld Hughes was sympathetic to journalists. As far as he was concerned, they should be treated like people.
Yeah, yeah. That was Haraud's view. Yeah.
And then in another moment, this is actually in plays, prose pieces.
Okay. Yeah.
And poetry.
Oh yes, he does have a physical fight with a journalist.
He has a physical fight with a journalist.
With a theatre critic.
And,
yeah.
Quite early on, this
yeah.
is that Harauld said that he was asked by a journalist one of those pitiless limpets on civilization's failing hull.
Yeah. Yes. Again, that's Harauld. Yeah. But one of the things that Harauld wouldn't allow at all was the sound of pen on paper in any of his theatrical productions. So he would only allow soft crayons for reviewers, and he would not allow photography, but he would allow watercolour.
Can I ask, did you make that up just now? Or is that a moment from...
No,
are you always adding to the Harauld Hughes canon?
No, that's in it.
Okay.
That's in this one, I believe, in some iteration. But there are things that add, but one of the things I wanted to do was to write something about a dead person, a comic character who was dead, because I think there's a kind of solemnity and a mock heroic reverence that's heaped upon someone as soon as they die, which often you see on, well, now X, where people go, I can't believe they died. And you go, what did you think was going to happen? I did think they would die. They were definitely going to die. But now, you know, it's really important, everything the person's done. Or, you know, so I thought there's something in that territory, and also something in the retrospective, where someone says, well, now finally we have all of Kingsley Amos's telegrams. And they're all in one 2,000-page book. So that completist thing as well, I thought, could be a good area to do something in.
You do say, I mean, it's I'd say reasonably bleak line in amongst a kind of a book of brilliant humour, that dying is the only task you'll definitely complete.
Yeah, I find that funny. But I think what's funny about it is the idea that, you know, people think they can complete tasks.
Do you think this is completed?
I mean, it's
still called Unfinished, actually, to be fair.
I mean, it's printed, but in a way, thank you. I think the idea is that, you could stage these plays, and you could sort of do them. Potentially you might do that, and then, so there would be a kind of life in it, and I suppose talking around it, as you say, does create a kind of life around it, or, English A-level, that was always the idea that you're somehow completing the text with reading it in a certain sense. So I think that's just to get us to read it. But yeah, I think things do go on. Yeah, each time you see films, they feel different, depending on where you are.
And if they're in SD or
If they're in SD or HD, or on a PlayStation.
We'll get the microphone out to the crowd. There was, while the microphone kind of went, your use of names, while we have, if people want to put their hands up, we'll go up to you. Your use of names is very fun.
Okay.
A cameraman called Tony Camera.
Yes. And well, he's not actually called Tony Camera.
Sorry. That's the name that you get. Yeah.
They call him Tony Camera, and there's someone called Wigsy Sound who does the sound. Yeah. He's so just, I think that happens. It does happen a bit on film jobs because people are so peripatetic. They can end up with sort of these, names that are just descriptors of what they do.
I found an actual person on IMDb the other day. I had to double check it. I saw it online. A producer and writer for NCIS, Moonlighting and the Hill Street Blues, called Roger Director.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, questions?
That's good. That's nominative determinism in action.
Yes, question down here.
Hi, thank you. Paul Atherton. Richard, I was curious, as you're describing this, how hard it was to pitch this to a publisher and how receptive they were.
Yeah. Well, I didn't pitch it to them. I just sort of wrote it. Otherwise, they would have had the chance to have turned it down. But it went through different iterations. So originally, the idea was to write what this writer had done and then have just critical essays intermixed with the films and the theatre. And, like, you used to get these things called case books, like a case book on James Joyce and 8 different critical perspectives on Dubliners or something. But that, believe it or not, was more niche than what it ended up being. And so it kind of developed into a narrative, and another book came out of, I guess, what was just going to be Harauld Hughes's work, and that was the original idea. But I suppose with prose, it's still relatively low risk as a thing. You're not asking for hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's, I think people are still willing to do that. I think that's why, there are still interesting writers doing things, because it's free of commercial pressures.
And how did your first conversations with Faber?
They were very upset. No, they were
because they published your rather.
Yes, I've published 3 other books which you could say exist in the world of film. So the first book was in the world of directors who interviewed and dispensing their wisdom. There's another book which is like, This Is How You Make All Films, one of those books, like a story by Robert McKee. And there's another book which was like a monograph, so it was a full book just about the Gwyneth Paltrow film, View from the Top. And so, in a way, they'd already, given up by that stage. So it didn't sound, I think, less strange than those. So it was okay, I think. And there's a guy there, Walter Donahue, and he's extremely receptive to things like that. He's, he publishes the Coen Brothers screenplays and Wes Anderson screenplays, and he's worked with Wim Wenders, and so he's from that old avant-garde theatre. He would have done Sam Shepard off Broadway, where someone's just standing in a cowboy boot for 4 hours. It's kind of fine.
Any more? Yeah, just at the front right here.
Thank you. I'm just interested to hear about how you get these ideas. I loved reading Ayoade on top. I really enjoyed that. It's my first book I read of yours. I'm
thanks very
intrigued
much.
as to how you get these ideas. Are you searching for them? Do they just pop up organically? Did you watch Gwyneth Paltrow's film?
Yes.
And just, that was it. That was the lightning bolt. You know, just...
Yes, my wife and I watched View from the Top, and when it got to the bloopers, and we were certain the film had ended, it was a time for reflection on where we were, where the people making the film were, where the culture was. And so it really was like, well, okay, evidently no one in this film thought this would be their last film. And it had the feel of a film made on the way to another film. But what if you decided and took it as seriously as Citizen Kane and went, this is, okay, well, we're really going to analyse every scene of this film as being highly intended, really worked on, and where everyone's really given of their best. And so it just seemed, that seemed a funny thing to do. So in a sense, it wasn't particularly with that book to really denigrate the film, but more just show up the process of a certain kind of a critical pomposity, I suppose.
So the joke is always on you as a writer?
I hope so. That's the idea, to have a kind of comic character lead you through it in a way. You know, one of the things that I've really got into recently is P.G. Wodehouse, which I was always worried wasn't for me. I thought it was too going to be about a milieu I didn't understand, that it was going to be about a sort of class level that I couldn't comprehend or was alien to me. But what is, I think the things that make it so enduringly brilliant is that he really likes all of his characters. He doesn't sell any of them out or condescend, and he himself is ridiculous. As a kind of narrator, he knows to sort of not kind of spare himself somehow, not to kind of pull strings in an underhand way, or he is the silly person not quite being able to understand this world who would equally get it wrong as the characters. And I think that's why he's such a pleasure to be alongside.
I think there's an element of what you just said about P.G. Wodehouse in the narrator in this book. There's a kind of certain agony towards the end of the book. I mean, we won't spoil it, but there is an element where an unfinished project about an unfinished thing. And did you kind of take that as inspiration into...
Well, you know, I love his writing, and in a sense, no one grows in a P.G. Wodehouse book, really. People get married, but they don't grow, which is and Jeeves and, say, Worcester, they just stay the same in a way. And so it made sense for the film that they're talking about not to be finished. You know, it makes sense that when Bertie has to judge the Nobby Needs competition, he's not going to do it well, you know, and it's going to be a write-off and it's going to be back where he started. Or, you know, there's one of the Jeeves books really about Jeeves really being uncertain about the tie that Bertie's decided to wear. And can he convince him not to wear this tie anymore? And it's a very small and a slight thing. But you kind of get, and at the end, you kind of get back to that same question, really.
Any more? Just,
Craig Thomas. I haven't read the scripts for 4 films, but
you're not alone.
But please, can you make the films?
Oh, well, you're very kind. Well, I suppose we're waiting for Tom Cruise, and it'll just be a schedule thing, I imagine. So we'll see.
And when you phone him, it'll be...
When I phone him, when I get through to him. He's always mid-air, is the problem with Tom. So when he does answer, it's very windy, because he's free-falling from somewhere.
And he'll presumably pick up the phone.
Yeah, he'll pick up the phone and just go,
so I have to do it.
Yeah, and sorry, that's the wind. But yes, I don't know. Who knows?
You're working on another film currently.
I've been writing with someone called George Saunders, who's a great writer. Wrote a book called 10th of December, Lincoln in the Bardo. He wrote, amongst other, Civil War, Land and Bad Decline. And we've got a script, and then, we'll just sort of see how it lands. And they're slow films. They're sort of very slow, gestating beasts.
On the double, going back to your second film, there's actually, I think, a crossover of. Is there a kind of a fascination with doppelgangers? Because obviously your doppelganger is Harauld Hughes, but the double is based on Dostoevsky's book. Do you find that just something that is a really rich theme of story making?
I think there is, again, I think P.G. Wodehouse wrote a book called If I Were You, which is a changing story, which I think is a pretty good title for a mixed up, If I Were You. It's pretty good. Also, he had a very good title that he never got to use for an autobiography. No, actually, this was S.J. Perelman. This is a good, see if you think this is a good title for an autobiography, The Hindsight Saga. It's a pretty good title. Anyway.
Do you think he owns the right of that?
I think morally he owns the right to that.
So you
can't.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's pretty good. But I think often in Congreve, or you have people mistaken for other people, and it's quite a good way of showing what people think of people, and it's a good way of people seeing what people think of them. But the double came from a writer called Avi Kareen. It was his idea to adapt the Dostoevsky story, and so in many ways the interest in that will have come through him and sparked that. But I do think it. I do like it when I see it. I do like it in Louis Buñuel when people play the same parts. I like it. It's something about even Doctor Strangelove now being on. Something about people doing. One person doing different parts is quite interesting.
How did you, the whole film, it was obviously Jesse Eisenberg doubled up. The process of that, the kind of the scenes, some of the scenes in that are kind of amazing. The set pieces of when he's looking through the window, but even the actual technicalities of how you filmed it. Do you see scenes in your own life? Do you look at something you might be cycling from South London through and go, this is like a movie? Or when you're on a set, or when you're looking at a script and you're like, okay, how does this look in your mind? Do you see things? Do you see what I'm...
Yes, yes, I do, I think.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
I was at a pub just around the corner 2 weeks ago with a colleague here, and I was playing darts. It was a Friday lunchtime. I shouldn't say that out loud.
This sounds like an issue for HR.
I was playing darts, and they were just talking kind of to me. And there was just the barman, and a huge man came in, 6'8" perhaps, with a big trench coat, and he just came in, stood next to the dartboard, back to us, and he just answered the phone, and he said, "Yep, sure. I'll get it sorted."
Okay.
And I said to my colleague, this is like what is going to happen? What's the next scene? And then when you realise it was just me throwing more darts, it became a much less interesting movie.
Yes. Did you follow him?
No.
No. Okay.
No. It was scary. It was genuinely scary.
This could be Quantum Leap. It could have been from the future. I mean, in a way, I think there are certain things that you hear, like, say, Alfred Hitchcock trying to do, invented the dolly zoom shot where you track back and zoom in and the background kind of foreshortens because he was drunk and he was at the top of a building and he looked down and that's what he thought the stairwell did. He tried to reproduce that as an optical effect. And so I can imagine a visionary like him will see some things and go, okay, how can I do that? But mainly I think you're in a story with certain needs, and actually the things that you might try and put in which might be biographical or because you've seen them, end up not adhering to the story. It's more that you try and have a sense of what is this like, and then maybe that will draw from other things, but it actually ends up being just what it is, I think, more often than you taking something that happened and transposing it directly.
Yeah. Any more questions? There's sort of one. Sorry, yeah, go on.
Hi. You said you've been thinking about this for about 10 years. So why did you want to write about a character like Harauld Hughes, or was it therapy for your experiences in the industry?
I like writers, really, and I think one of the things about writing with a character is it allows, I think what it does is it allows some of the thrill of writing in first person, which is always enjoyable, but with some of the objectivity of being able to report on that person. So if you make it archival in a way, you get to do both somehow, and you get to inhabit that person's way of thinking and then to comment on it. And that seems interesting to me. But yeah, there wasn't sort of any particular personal scores or anything like that, but more just sometimes really wanting to be in a certain world, and then you write in order to be in that world somehow. They disagree.
Any more questions? Just there's one there.
Hello, hi, thanks for your talk. My name's Becca. I was wondering, what do you think is unique about the medium of film, maybe in response to Lady Lovelock's describing it as a meringue?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that is unique about it are some of the kind of connections that can be made. So one of the things that I think of is, say, in 2001, throwing the bone and then it turning into a spaceship. So by the montage of putting one image next to another, you can create an association in the viewer's mind that occurs in real time, and there's a new creation. So I think that's one of the things it does. I think it is very interesting in terms of time, and what you can do with time in terms of foreshortening it or not, or having an expectation of time but a different cinematic time. And it's one of the things that can combine a lot of different elements like music and portraiture and theatre, and yeah. So I think it's a kind of composite of many things. I think that's what it can do. Yeah, it's kind of a jack of all trades, but with a specific thing of juxtaposition that I think is amazing in film.
There's a question just here.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to share one thing. So I think I lived through your book, because I think the original, some of those 750 copies turned up in a independent bookshop in Queen's Park, which is exactly where they should have been.
Yes.
And I picked those up first.
Yes.
And then I saw that there was a book about the guy that had written the plays.
Yeah.
And then I realised he looked a bit like you.
Yes.
So
yes, that's
I feel like I should write that book.
I think you should write that book. And here's the thing. These books, so there's a limited number of this book, and through a clerical error, I didn't manage to get any of the books, but I told various people I would get them booked. So like J.R. Hartley, I bought that book, I think, from your bookshop online.
It's not my bookshop. I go
okay.
every day, and there was.
Okay, well, by the bookshop. But I had to buy some of these books online in a sort of dreadful kind of snake eating its own tail moment, because I couldn't get the books.
Presumably it was from a retailer that kind of hand packaged it, and when it says Ayoade postcode and stuff, what's going on?
I think it was just handled by an algorithm. It was fine, yeah. But I had an even greater. Yes, it had a particular free song.
I think we've got time for maybe one more question, If not, we are going to. We've got those books to sign. Oh, sorry, yeah, right there, sorry. Just in the middle.
Hi, Richard. I was just wondering if you could tell us the difference between you and your alter ego in the book. Like, is it a chance to, make a better version of yourself? Is it exploring the worst parts of yourself that you don't want to, show publicly, or is it a different alter ego entirely?
Okay, yes, no, it's a good question. I think, in a way, it probably ends up, it's not quite like this, but maybe there's a similarity between, say, a stand-up and who they are, that it's some form of version of yourself that is effective in the medium. So I think what happens with stand-ups is it just becomes a kind of semi-permeable...
Sorry, we just picked a picture up of Harauld Hughes. That is Harauld Hughes. That's...
that's Harauld Hughes, that's not me. So I think often with stand-ups, like say if you know them, what happens on stage is just the things about them that people find funny. And then the things that aren't funny just are left outside. And so it may not be the part of them that they like, it might be the part that just people recognize as having some form of coherence with what they look like, or being at odds with what they look like. So I think it's that kind of a thing, really. I don't know if that answers the question.
No.
But in a sense, it's almost like an audience decides who you are, I think, very often.
I think that's a fantastic place to leave that on. Richard, thank you so much for your time. You're sticking around to sign some books, I believe. I think.
Yes, but that's not a mandate. You're free to leave as well.
You can buy books from over there, but on behalf of everyone here at Tortoise, Richard Ayoade, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.